Sure.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back. I'm Leo from Future Networks, and today I'm joined by Karam Lakshman, who is CEO and co-founder of Dabba. Dabba is a company and a relatively new DePIN project bringing connectivity, internet connectivity to India. Really looking forward to hearing a bit more about the company and what you guys are doing. So Karam, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me. Really excited to be on. And by the way, I love the stuff that you've done with Future Network so far.
Amazing. Really appreciate that. And right back at you with Dabba as well. As you know, I've been in touch with Dawn a few times. Been great to speak with Dawn from your team. And yeah, you and I have never spoken before. So this is actually the first conversation we've had. And yeah, let's get right into it. So yeah, Karan, before we start, I would love to, well, before we get into what Dabba is, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your background and what led you to Dabba.
Yeah, for sure. So Dabba is actually two co-founders, Shubs and myself. We've been working together for the last 15 years, most of which has been running a software consultancy company where we would build logistics software for companies that delivered high-value items like gold, jewelry, cash, human organs, that sort of thing. While we were building all of this software for these companies, and the experience was amazing because it's exactly the sort of thing that you see in movies where, all of these are armored trucks, guys with guns, high secure, that sort of thing. We'd have this little ritual where the entire company would go to a tea stall near our office, and sort of having chai at 5 o'clock in the evening is a very Indian company tradition. I think pretty much everyone does it here. And at this location, when everyone's having chai, inevitably we'd sort of end up having our stand-up meetings and we'd get calls from customers, that sort of thing. And we really wanted better connectivity. So what we decided to do was install a Wi-Fi router and a broadband connection at the store, and we would just use it for us. Pretty soon, all of the customers at that store wanted to have access to the Wi-Fi. The store owner wanted it for a million reasons, and then we really quickly realized that there was this massive gap for high-speed internet connections in India, and we realized we could do something about it. And a couple of years later, here we are.
Amazing. That's a fascinating story. So going from delivering human organs to delivering internet. And it's really cool. It's kind of born out of a real life use case that you guys had lived through. So from what I've read, it's a very, very necessary service. So I think you put on your website, it says on your website that, the demand for internet is growing approximately twofold every 18 months. I think there's also around 1.4 billion people in India, and only about 30 million of them connected. So that's about 2% market penetration. So it does sound like a very, very necessary service. Perhaps you could expand on that and tell us a little bit more about, how Dabba fits into this and exactly what you guys are doing.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. India is this unique snowflake market, which is unlike anything else in the world. So the first thing is we're the second largest telecom market in the world, apart from China. Uh, we had this experience where, because the country's been developing over the last 20 years, we skipped a lot of steps in evolution that more developed countries had to do. So, for example, India jumped straight from no phone connections straight to mobile connections, right? There was no landline phase in between. And so, as a result, with the exploding population and the exploding sizes of the cities, everyone who got online through 3G or 4G connections. The reason broadband never picked up is since the rate of growth has been so insane, cities and infrastructure have not been able to keep up with being able to lay down fiber optical networks as cities have grown. So we've never had this phase where you have the underlying infrastructure to deliver broadband connectivity. So one is, despite that, uh, apart from being the second largest telecom network in consumer base in the world, India has the highest amount of data consumption in the world, despite only having vastly 4G. So Indians already average somewhere between 30 and 40 gigabytes a month just on their phones.
Wow.
And in India, we have this concept of what we call a two SIM lifestyle. everybody has dual SIM cards from two networks because there's not enough data on any plan for one network. The other
Amazing.
really interesting thing that happened is now the 4G and 5G networks are choked, right? They have put as many telecom towers as they could, and you can't put more towers to connect more people because it's sort of a law of physics, right? There's only so much you can pack into the airwaves. And so now there's this mad rush to build out broadband internet access. To give you a sense of scale of the kind of task that's ahead is the US has about 90 something percent penetration of about 120 million broadband connections. China has about 650 million connections. India, as you mentioned, only has 30 million. So, as a country, we're going to roll out something on the order of 500 million broadband connections over the next decade, 2 decades, right? So any company or any project that can be part of that in any way is going to scale like mad. And so the final piece of this puzzle is, interestingly, unlike the rest of the developed world, there is no monopoly on broadband. It is not a situation where you have the two telecom or three telecom providers. Like say in the US, between AT&T, T-Mobile, and Verizon, they own 99% of the market, right? Whereas in India, that cannot happen in broadband because we have this sort of very unique system where the way that cable TV proliferated in India is one guy would get a dish antenna, pointed to get a satellite signal of all of the channels, and then have a mini network of a couple of hundred subscribers. So we call these local cable operators. There are 150,000 local cable operators in India with a couple of hundred or a couple of thousand subscribers each. So all of these people, because of the explosion of data and everyone wants to now stream content to the rest of that, all of these local cable providers are turning into small internet service providers. So our goal at Dabba is to aggregate all of these people the same way that Uber did with taxi drivers, DoorDash does, everyone else does, put them all together in a unified system, provide them great hardware, great software, and great support, and help them scale out their networks under a single Dabba umbrella. And we think that using DePIN and DePIN principles is the right way to organize all these stakeholders to, deploy at least 100 million internet connections in the next couple of years.
Wow, there's a lot to unpack there. A lot of information.
Yeah.
That's amazing, though. It's incredible the opportunity that's there, the size of the market. I mean, so you said that in the US there's 90% market penetration. And in India currently, was my 2% figure correct?
It's closer to about 5% right now.
Close to about 5%, but I mean, still 5%, and you've got over 1.4 billion population. That is a huge market. And going back to what you said, so this is on a slightly different note, but from a practical perspective, so you say that a lot of people, if not like the majority of people, have two SIM cards. Do you like save someone's number as like Leo 1, Leo 2 in your phone, and then like you kind of know who's calling, or?
Oh, we're in the post telecom. You know how there's late stage capitalism? India is in late stage telecom, where getting a new phone number is no big deal. And so what everyone does is just keep getting the introductory offer for that SIM card, and then going through the introductory like bonus data, throwing it away and getting a new number. Because everyone here makes calls on WhatsApp and that sort of thing, right? Nobody gives a damn about anyone's phone number.
That's true. Okay, and so it sounds like compared to Western countries, the market sounds very much fragmented, right? So what was the number of, you called them LCOs, so local cable operators. How many did you say there were in India?
150,000 registered ones. So in reality, it's closer to about 200,000.
Okay. And as I understood, Dabba's approach is to work with these LCOs. So you get the hardware, which is funded via, so anybody who wants to kind of purchase a Wi-Fi router can go onto the Dabba website, purchase a router, and then we will never touch the hardware, right? It will be the LCOs, the local cable operators, who will receive that hardware and do the installation and be the ones who actually do that last mile service of getting cables where they need to go, getting the Wi-Fi hotspots installed into the buildings, and actually the ones who provide the service.
Could not have said it better myself. If someone asked me that question, I'm going to rip off your answer. It was perfect.
Awesome. Okay. And so Interesting. So I ask a lot of founders this question. It's actually quite obvious to me in this case, but why the DePIN model for Dabba?
So two things. We actually think that if you sort of look at it as a marketplace, it makes a lot of sense to use DePIN and crypto. So thing number one is, first is let's put ourselves in the shoes of what it is to be a small local cable operator, right? You're probably a male in your mid 20s to late 40s. You have some sort of technical understanding because you knew how to hook up a dish antenna, multiplex the signal, handle subscribers. You have great local relationships in your neighborhood, that sort of thing. You also probably have some sort of small side business, like you dabble in real estate sales a little bit, or you've got a tiny shop that sells, mobile phone covers or things like that. Now, the challenge that you have is every additional subscriber you want to get costs you a little bit of money because, like you mentioned, you got to give them a Wi-Fi router, you got to lay the cable, you got to maintain it, and all of that sort of thing. Because the Indian customer has enough money to pay the monthly subscription for the fee, but they can't pay the installation cost. So that has to be borne by the LCO. And for the LCO in a country where our financial systems are still not great, it's really hard for the LCO to go to a bank and get a loan and say, hey, I want to expand my network. And we are also, apart from being, or rather as a result of being the second largest telecom network with the highest amount of data usage, we already have the lowest data rates. So the incremental profit that an LCO makes per connection is not enough to expand the network on its own till he hits a certain size. Because telecom is entirely a game of volume, especially in a market that has millions of people. So the challenge that the LCO is, he has the on-ground knowledge, he has the local know-how, he has the marketing ability, the desire is there in the customer. It's just that capital gap, of just that little bit that it takes to install that new connection. Now, on the other hand, so let me just give you a brief history of how we got here, or I'll come to that in a bit. On the other hand, Helium and other projects like that, what I would call the first generation of DePIN, showed that people are willing to subsidize network infrastructure and other type of infrastructure. So it seems only natural that if you can match these two parties together, you get this incredible thing where this person benefits by helping create that infrastructure, that person benefits by helping maintain and scale that infrastructure. And the biggest thing that we think that we can bring to the DePIN market is paying customers, actual demand. Because right now, by and large, a tremendous number of DePIN projects, and not to say that it's the wrong approach, there's nothing wrong about it, but a lot of the go-to-market strategies in DePIN so far have been build out supply and demand will magically appear. Whereas here, we've got this system of a ridiculous amount of demand, and we just sort of need to match supply to it. So we think it's a really natural fit.
Yeah,
one last fact that sort of ties in everything together, just sort of put it in. Second from the US, India is the largest number of crypto wallet holders, with the second most active market for crypto. So customers naturally understand it. All of the LCOs have bought tokens at some point and dabbled it in some way. So everyone sort of understands what the incentive structure is and how everything works. So even getting LCOs on board is not much of an issue because it's an area that they are now familiar with and excited about.
Amazing. It's the perfect storm. And it is a really interesting model. Going back to what you said about, some other DePIN projects that haven't yet been able to get to the point where they're generating sufficient revenue. You already have the demand there, as you say. It's like everyone's screaming out, they want the connectivity. So that's a great starting point. The other thing that I really love about it, it's so Web3, right? It's the LCOs, as you put yourself in their shoes, if they can't go to a bank to get a loan, despite the fact that the demand's there and they have like people waiting there, it's using crypto as a way to access capital markets that otherwise they wouldn't have access to. And I think that I absolutely love that approach. It's very Web3, it's very crypto, and it's also very, very DePIN. The fact that the LCOs have dabbled in DePIN, they're going to be open to getting added rewards from the token incentive. It really does seem like the perfect storm there. So yeah, I think that's really, really cool.
And if you sort of take that sort of principle to it, like one step logical further, and we'll be making announcements about this coming soon, but I can tell you a little bit about how that might work. So if an LCO is, okay, actually, let's approach it more from a DePIN project's perspective. Let's say that you're a DePIN project that sells weather tracking. devices, right? And you're trying to build this weather network around the world. Now, if I ship you this weather device, you're going to install it. It's going to be great. You're going to get the rewards and you're going to be really happy. But you are very unlikely to buy 10 of them because of the hassle of you going and installing that and so on and so forth. Now, if a Dabba LCO is going to take all of the effort to go and install an internet connection and a Wi-Fi router and a cable in someone's house, they sure as shit can go and install a weather device as well. So we think that there's a very interesting platform that we can build out that can be leveraged for a whole host of DePIN projects also as well.
So almost doing a kind of mass DePIN deployer approach under the same umbrella of these LCOs, which is a concept obviously at Fusion Networks here we're very familiar with. So I also absolutely love that. It's like getting DePIN hardware out there. It's helping the growth of the whole DePIN ecosystem. I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, fundamentally. I mean, it's curious to see how the road goes, but it seems like one of those natural things that one should try for sure.
So when you were sat there having your chai and came up with this idea, did you consider at the beginning taking a Web 2 approach? Was this before you were familiar with Helium? And what did that look like? And when did you have that kind of aha moment when it came to actually DePIN is going to solve all of our cold start issues?
Okay, took a sip of water for that one because that's going to be a tiny bit long-winded, but I'll do it as quick as I can. So here's the sequence of events basically, and you'll see that it's sort of a very fairly linear line. That's a little extreme, but that sort of got us where we are. So we installed this router at our one store, and pretty much within the following week, all of the other stores in the neighborhood were like, yeah, we want Wi-Fi at our store also. Because they saw customers were hanging out more and it was an interesting talking point, all of that sort of thing. We were very clear from day one that this would be a paid service, that it's not free Wi-Fi. There's no free Wi-Fi on our network at all. Everyone pays for data. Basically, they're paying 1 cent a gigabyte, just to give you a sense of what it costs the end customer. And so, we expanded to 10 stores and we took a serious look at, okay, let's look at expanding this sort of thing. But before we had started our services company, Shubes and I, for about 5 years before that, had raised a tiny amount of venture capital to try launching a startup. This was like 2010 or something along those lines. And we tried for 5 years. We built like 30 apps or something. We failed miserably. And that's when we gave up and said, software consultancy, here we come. So when we launched this Wi-Fi service in these 10, 20 locations, we were like, man, it's going to pay for itself, right? We're not running a loss-making product here. This thing better make money. Then very quickly, we started seeing demand coming in from hundreds of stores. And we were like, okay, if we're going to really do this, no choice, but you got to raise some capital to see how this thing goes, to scale this thing out. So we decided the only place that we were going to apply to was Y Combinator. And so literally on YC's last day, we applied to them. And as luck would have it, they accepted us. So that worked out really well. So we sold our services company to our biggest client. And in 2017, we raised a little bit of money from YC and some angels. And we scaled to 1,000 hotspots across Bangalore over the course of 2017. What we used to do was we would go to a neighborhood and sell all of the locations saying, hey, we'll install Wi-Fi here and all of that. And we would connect with all the local cable operators saying, can you provide connectivity and that sort of thing. So we really quickly ran into a wall where we would sell more locations, but our cable partner at that location would not be able to service it because he was constrained in bandwidth, because his network had only so much capacity, because as I mentioned at the beginning of this, the underlying infrastructure isn't there to support him to begin with. So we took a long, hard look at, okay, how do we improve the lives of our partners so we can roll out more locations? And we found that underground fiber cable optic was the big problem. If you want to build a core network for an ISP, inside a city, basically, you got to lay concentric rings of fiber optic cable to form a core network that then houses and offices and your end customers get connected to. In a developing city, and especially anywhere in the world, that's crazy expensive, right? It runs on the order of like $100,000 a kilometer, plus you have to have the political connections, plus everything else in between. So we sort of looked at, okay, what can we do to solve this? Along the same time period, we were actually powering a substantial part of Google public Wi-Fi in India. So it would say
Wow.
Google public Wi-Fi, but we are the underlying providers that are connecting the routers, our hardware, our software, everything, but it says Google, right? Whatever. But the Google dudes introduced us to their X research division. Those guys were doing that balloon project where Google was launching internet balloons all over, and of course Google realized that that's a stupid idea. No country is going to let you have a balloon flying over the country at all times. But the cool thing that that project had was it used lasers to communicate between balloons. So the balloon would have a 4G antenna pointing downward, but the backhaul between the balloons was laser. And this laser was amazing throughput. So we talked to the team and we were like, yo, let's put this on rooftops across the city, do a poor man's version of Starlink. I mean, Starlink wasn't even launched at the time, but it was being talked about. So we were like, so let's do this poor man's version of Starlink. Instead of doing underground cable, you can do a rooftop laser network. So all of 2018, 2019, we rolled out almost a dozen of Google's lasers. And they worked really well, right? We did, in tropical heat, tropical thunderstorms, monkeys, people, everything, you name it, they're rock solid and amazing. But the challenge we had at the time was the laser units from Google were way too expensive. And for the kind of urban environment and that sort of thing that we wanted, we needed a cheaper unit. They had a different target in mind, so we were like, cool, let's build our own laser. And so we built our own laser, and you'll see it launching towards the end of this year. But the other thing was, throughout this entire period, at this time, India went through its 4G revolution. We used to have 15 telecom operators in India, and then this one giant telco, brand new one, came in, gave free 4G for 2 years to 600 million people, right? And so they broke the back of the market, and there was this massive bloodbath, and 13 out of 14 telecom operators shut shop and died, right? So now there are only two left. So during this time period when we're rolling out our network, all of this is happening in the 4G and 5G space, and no investor is willing to give us any money to build our network. Despite us having a profitable, successful, great network, they're like, hey, the big telco is going to kill you, right? It doesn't matter. You guys are nothing. And so we couldn't raise venture capital at all. But the one thing that happened through this entire, and we're up to about 2020 now, we've been running for about 5 years, up to 4 years up to this point. The one thing that we always had was we would always get an email or a call from somebody going, we love what you're doing. Are you coming to my area? How can I help out? Do you have a franchisee model? That sort of thing. So then we were like, okay, if no one's private capital is not willing to give us capital, is the public willing to put their money where their mouth is? So we launched this program where we started doing sort of pre-sales of the network in a very Web2 standard sort of revenue share fashion. And as we started talking to people, everybody was like, hey, have you heard of this helium thing? Helium this, helium that, helium, helium, helium. So we were like, okay, who's helium? What's helium? And that sort of thing. And then I think someone got in touch with the folks in Multicoin or at Helium. We ended up connecting with them. And then we realized, whoa, okay, so other people have gone down this road. This is a better way of building a network, so on and so forth. So in 2022, we raised a little capital from Multicoin, Borderless, some of the founders of Helium, that sort of thing. And yeah, we are now sort of gearing up to bring our network online. We hope to do a TGE in a couple of months. Here's where we are. So it's been a very linear path of learning how to build a network, learning that people are willing to support the network, and then building the structure in place that allows people to support the building of the network and rewarding them in turn. So it's been 8 years.
Amazing. No, that's quite the journey, and it's really helpful to get that full context. So thanks for breaking that down. And in fact, I'm going to correct myself from earlier. You went from delivering human organs to beaming lasers over rooftops and building your own laser beamers. That's awesome. A very cool story. And a lot of traction so far as well. Perhaps you could break down, since launching Dabba, what you have achieved in terms of hotspots deployed. And then, sorry, a follow-on question to that. It's actually slightly unrelated, but you mentioned that the laser beaming, you're going to be bringing that back later in the year. Is that correct? So right now they're all done via cables. Later in the year, you're going to bring back the laser approach.
Yeah. So in terms of stats, it's really good. So we've bought 1,000. Season 1 was 1,000 routers that we have now deployed on our testnet, and you'll be able to see it on our Explorer. Season 2 sales just kicked off, and that's going to be 10,000 units. We've sold a couple of thousand already. If anyone watching this is interested, please consider checking it out. we are averaging insane data transfers. I think in another day or two, basically in the last 3 months, we would have transferred something like close to 1,000 terabytes of data. So consumption is off the charts and growing. We're in 3 cities right now. Over the next couple of months, you'll see us expand to 10,000 routers and more than a dozen cities as we go forward.
Amazing. If somebody listening does want to get involved, is it just a case of going onto the Dabba website and hitting buy now and just buying a router?
Absolutely. It's that simple.
Awesome.
We want to bring the concept of managed, hassle-free deployment. Click and buy, and the LCO will take care of everything else from there.
So we'll definitely put a link to your website in the description to this. So anyone listening wants to get involved, have a look at the link down below. Is there anything at all they need to do after they buy it? Yeah. What happens next?
Yeah, so it's a super straightforward process. So you buy your hotspot, then you can log into our Explorer. There are instructions of how to bring the hotspot online and that sort of thing. Fairly straightforward couple-of-minute process. If you have any issues, join our Discord. Our community is pretty active. Also, please, of course, consider following us on X as well.
Awesome. Again, all those links, Discord, X, I'll put them in the description. So just have a quick look below. But amazing, very exciting times, Karam. And looking forward, let's say, to the end of 2025, do you have any specific goals that you guys are working towards?
Total market domination. Millions of hotspots as fast as we can.
Amazing. Absolutely love it. So before we depart, Karam, anything else that you want to tell anyone listening to this, why they should be excited for the future? Anything else that you'd like to add in?
Yeah, I'd like to put in that there is a unique opportunity here to be, or put it this way, if you could be a part of AT&T the day that it was founded, if you could travel back in time to do that, well, you can't, but we're going to be the next AT&T, and so consider being part of the project. It's got a great future.
Amazing. And I look forward to definitely being a part of that journey with you guys as well, seeing how you develop. And yeah, thank you so much, Karam, for coming on. Really appreciate your time, and we'll be tracking your progress going forwards.
Awesome. Thanks so much.